inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach, and appreciate you joining me today. It's Tuesday, December 10th, and we got a lot to get to, man. There's been so much happen in the last few weeks, and as we're going into the close of 2024, our last few weeks together, this is no time to slow down. I am so thankful that the attitude and the appetite of the American people is exactly what's needed for such a time as this. There is such an interest in pressing the gas, moving forward, taking ground back, not slowing down. The recognition of where we are as a nation and how close we came to losing liberty in America, how close we came to entrenching a Marxist regime, literally a Marxist mentality, took over the Democrat Party and nearly took over the nation for an extended period of time to the point that it would be very hard to turn back. I mean, there's no doubt they controlled the nation for the last 4 years. The Biden administration was essentially used to implement a ton of Marxist ideologies and certainly an abuse of our justice system and our election system and all of these different things. And it was getting to the point where if they were able to maintain that for another 4 years, it would have been very difficult to come back from that. And so this reprieve that the Lord has given us, this mercy when we deserve judgment, is something to be very thankful for as we go into the Christmas season, and also something to motivate us to press the gas. I think that's why people are not falling back on the old modus operandi was always, okay, well, we might wake up for the election and just enough people will get engaged and we might, squeak out a victory or we lose. Either way, everybody goes home and just goes back to, life is normal and I don't have to pay attention to those things and I'm too busy with all these other things in life to, worry about government and the country. That is not what's happening this time. This time, there's just an atmosphere for revolution in a spiritual way, not just a political way. And of course, a nonviolent way. I always have to say that ever since, J6 was absolutely manipulated by the left to try to have their Rostock fire, which was what was used by Hitler in 1933 to get total control. But I digress. Anyway, my point is, obviously, I mean a peaceful revolution. When I talk about political action today, or I talk about, storming the hill and all those metaphors, what I'm talking about is using your voice, your vote, and your money. In other words, voting with your dollars when you choose companies to do business with or candidates to donate to, using your voice every chance you get to speak up and let your values be counted, and then obviously the vote. And so the vote, though, is typically what most people tend to think of as, that's my citizen duty and I'll do that and I'm done. The ones that do that, right? We saw all the numbers this year where half of Christians saying they're not going to vote, and just all the absurdities of I just don't like the candidates, or just these snowflake reasons people chose to check out. So just getting them to use their vote was a big deal. But too many in the past have thought that was it, just the vote. That's my citizen duty, is to go vote. It is so much more than that. Your voice is constant. It's throughout the year. It's every chance you get. It may be as simple as calling into this program and letting your opinion be heard, letting your voice be heard, or encouraging others, or exhorting, sometimes even calling people on the carpet and saying what you're doing is wrong. Use your voice to influence the world around you. I watched the Bonhoeffer movie, I don't know, a week or two ago, and man, what an impact. This whole concept of silence in the face of evil is evil itself. To not act is to act. I mean, that mindset, that silence is itself a decision. and an action and a sin. When we're silent, when we know there's evil happening, when we know that we can do something about it, or maybe we don't even know that we can do something about it, but there's evil happening, and we know that we can at least try, that we have a voice to speak up, that we at a minimum can be, Paul Revere sounding the alarm, saying evil is coming and we need to do something about it. And to stay silent in that situation is just inexcusable for sure. And that has been the battle for 30 years for me. I've been in this fight and constantly trying to get people to be active and then trying to get them to stay active after an election. Well, man, my job is easier today in that regard than it's ever been because the appetite's incredible. People are staying engaged. I mean, these last few weeks has been like Christmas every day with the appointments from Donald Trump, with the actions, with the response of world leaders and things happening around the world, with frankly what's happening in my home state of Texas with a big speakers race going on right now for the Texas House of Representatives. That same type of battle happening all over the country. There's a I'm trying to think of the right word. I mean, it's not just a momentum. It's literally just like this snowball effect of courage. And so the people that spoke out, the pastors and the people running for office and the business leaders and all those who found their voice over the last year, that has now created a snowball effect where others who were afraid to speak out are starting to speak out, and also just an appetite not only for change and moving in the right direction and making the tough decisions, but no appetite for squishiness and wimpiness and this Joni Ernst, Lindsey Graham, mindset of essentially empowering Democrats, and only time they seem to take a stand is when it's against other Republicans. There's no appetite for that. I mean, you're watching the backlash against them. Now, John Cornyn in Texas, he got the message real quick. I mean, he's been around long enough. He reads the tea leaves. He's an absolute sellout and has sold, conservatives down the river for years and years. He's undermined any of the big, positive changes we've tried to make. And he knows that the appetite is different. In the past, he's been able to, like most politicians, right? It's why we all get frustrated with politicians, why we snarl when we even say the word politicians. It's why at Patriot Academy, we don't raise up politicians. We raise up patriots. Politicians only are thinking about the next election, so they sell you out to get reelected. Patriots are thinking about the next generation. There is no selling out because they're going to do whatever it takes to do what's right in order to preserve it for the next generation. Well, John Cornyn is no patriot. He is absolutely a politician, always thinking about the next election, always selling out his constituents in Texas and the Constitution and freedom. But he's a finger to the wind. Which way's the wind blowing? And he's good at reading those tea leaves and getting out front. So what he would always do in the past is he would campaign as Big John, and he's going to, go stand for Texas and do all these things. And then he'd get to D.C. and sell us out behind the scenes. He was always really good at making sure it wasn't too public. It was behind the scenes. It was undermining things. It was working against candidates for the Senate in other states that were going to be good. But then he'd come back home and act like he was championing the good stuff, and he was just good at figuring out how to campaign one way and govern another way. All right, but this time he has been unable to pull the wool over the people's eyes. It was as if, immediately when Donald Trump started appointing these folks like Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz and all these people that just caused the establishment to lose their mind. They were going bonkers on the media, people like John Cornyn. All these wimpy Republicans behind the scenes freaking out and publicly just, I'm concerned, or, we'll give them their, fair hearing and all that. So starting to do the dance, right? Where instead of saying, yes, we're going to support President Trump's appointees, he has a mandate, he won by a massive landslide. Instead of doing that, they were starting to do the dance so that they could kill these appointments behind the scenes, which is what happened with Matt Gaetz. So they got Gaetz, that's their scalp. And then they went after Hegseth and continue to do so. And guys like Cornyn were hedging. But I'm telling you, immediately, Republicans all over Texas started speaking out and already started talking about who to run against John Cornyn in 2026. So he's up in just 2 years, which means that campaign, he's actually up in about 15 months, 14 months, because it'll be a primary race. Whoever wins that Republican primary for U.S. Senate in Texas will win in November. There's just no doubt about it. So the real race is March of 2026. That's only 14 months away, which means the announcement for running in a race like that and beginning to raise money and campaign is now. So there will be, I believe, a serious challenger to John Cornyn. Now, I don't know who it's going to be. Who knows? It might be a wealthy businessman in Texas. It might be. Paxton has been talked about a lot. Our attorney general, who they tried to impeach and is essentially bulletproof now in Texas. So Ken Paxton would be a great candidate to run against John Cornyn, and he may be the one to run. There's a guy, friend of mine named Bo French, who's the Tarrant County Republican chairman and doing a phenomenal job at that. And I think ran for state rep, if I remember right, a few years ago. And anyway, business guy, smart guy, politically astute, well-spoken, all that good stuff. He'd be a great candidate. David Barton. I tried to draft David Barton to run back in 2014 against John Cornyn, and it almost happened. Somebody like that has the name ID that the money would come in for and that would be really good in the Senate. I think that's going to happen in 2026, no matter what. And John Cornyn knows that. And so he read those tea leaves, and he immediately changed his tune and said at a Republican event just a couple nights ago, he's going to support Pete Hegseth, and he's going to support Trump's nominees. And so he's already trying for cover. Now, I think there's a chance he just doesn't run in 2026. I think he, again, reading the tea leaves, he knows the appetite for squishy, whiny, rhino Republicans is quickly going away. And the appetite for actual patriots and the kind of people that we raise up at Patriot Academy, that's where it's at right now. That's where the momentum's going to go. And so we've got a few years to tap into that and to get some real change in America. And not just in Texas, but all over the country. I mean, even in blue states, there's an appetite for change. It won't be like what we're going to see here in Texas or some of these other places, but there's just a national groundswell for restoring the Constitution, for getting back to the Declaration of Independence principles, and all of that is very, very good. And John Cornyn flipping so quickly is a sign of that. And I think we're going to see it all over the country. I think you're going to see, especially in places like Iowa, where Joni Ernst is not going to be able to get away with playing this game. I mean, they're already drafted. I'd love to see Steve Deace run against her. I think that would be absolutely incredible. He would be amazing in the U.S. Senate as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say, folks, is this is just the beginning. I mean, we're just getting started. So everything that you're feeling right now in terms of a positive outcome from the election and starting to see some of these things happen in Washington, D.C., I believe is just the beginning. Now, it will only be just the beginning if we actually do press the gas. What I was saying earlier, where people have an appetite for really marching forward, gaining ground, taking this window of opportunity. And I've said this many times over the last couple of weeks. It's just the window's cracked. And our job is to shove it open and dive through. Let's make the most of this moment in time that we have. And there is so much that we can do. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back from the break. Some of the things for you to be thinking about and preparing for as we close out 2024 in these last couple of weeks, but things you can already be preparing yourself to do in 2025 if you want to ride this wave. If you want to catch this wave and actually be a part of major change in this country that will have an impact for decades. I truly believe that. I think what we do in the next 15 to 18 months will have a ripple effect and a benefit for decades to come. And the timing couldn't be more perfect. We're 570, right at 70 days from the 250th birthday of the country. I mean, it's poetic. We couldn't ask for this to work out any better. I mean, God's timing, of course, is always perfect, but it's perfect, and he sees everything, and sometimes it doesn't feel perfect or look perfect to us because we're only looking through our human eyes. Well, even with our human eyes right now, it is obvious that this timing is perfect. The 250th birthday of the nation is right around the corner. So if we're 570 roughly days from July 4th, 2026, the 250th birthday of the country, what are you going to do to prepare, not just for that celebration, but to till the ground, plant the seeds, water the seeds, and prepare for the harvest of liberty in this country if we do the things that we have the opportunity to do right now? I've said this a few times over the last few weeks. In fact, I said it on election night on America Stands when we were watching all the returns come in. I've been with Wall Builders for 24 years now. David Barton paved the way for so much of what we're seeing and experiencing right now. But I thought at Wall Builders we were actually rebuilding the walls. In Nehemiah, rise and rebuild the walls that we may no longer be a reproach, no longer be in despair, no longer be falling apart as a country. And I thought we were rebuilding the walls over the last 25 years. I now realize that's not where we were in the story. We were still back there with the king, trying to convince the king to let us rebuild the walls. That's what we've been doing for the last 24 years, and that's what's happened. The king in America is we the people. And we the people have just said, you have our blessing. We the people have just said, go rebuild the foundations of America. Let's restore truth, justice, and the American way. More on that when we come back. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
We're going to dig a little deeper into the verse we started with, Matthew 6:24 and a few others. We cannot serve God and money. That generosity is a key piece of this as well, isn't it? I think about what Ron Blue, the author, says often, and that is that giving actually loosens the grip that money can have over our lives.
Faith and Finance with Rob West, weekdays at 9 a.m. Central or on the AFR app.
So let's just stop here and say the most important thing that you can do to protect your child online, the first thing that you should do is to pray for them. Pray for them every day, multiple times a day, and pray that God would protect them.
The Dr. Nurse Mama Show. For more from Dr. Jessica Peck, tune in at 2 p.m. Central on American Family Radio or on the podcast page at afr.net.
How much control, unfortunately, the executive office does have to direct a lot of these procedures in terms of amnesty, what they can do, even though Congress needs to step it up. And we know constitutionally they should be making sure that the law reflects the American position. But law enforcement is the executive branch. And if you're not enforcing the law, then the law is merely just on paper.
Jenna Ellis in the morning, weekdays at 7 Central on American.
Pray scripture-based prayers, and God will use you to be a greater blessing because you asked Him to. Lord, thank you for this day. Lord, bless me indeed. Expand my territory. Cause your hand to be mightily upon me. Keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain. In Jesus' name, amen.
Read the article Kingdom Prayers by Joseph Parker on thestand.net. Thestand.net.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach. Thanks for staying with me on this Tuesday. It's December 10th, and we're kind of, we're certainly not coasting into the end of the year, but people do tend to mentally start checking out a little bit long before Christmas. So we're a couple of weeks away from Christmas, but as I was saying in the first segment, we are not letting up on the gas. We're pressing the gas, and as I was going to the break, I was talking about the 250th and how it's time to rebuild the walls in America, and that I was kind of mentally in the wrong place in Nehemiah all these years, where with David Barton and Tim Barton and all the different organizations that we work with, as we've been, quote unquote, rebuilding the walls, I thought we were actually back in that part of Nehemiah where Nehemiah is trying to convince the king to let him go rebuild the walls and to give his blessing and money and protection and all of those things, the covering to go do it. And I'm just absolutely convinced that we're at that point in the story. We have just received permission of the king, the people in America. Thankfully, we don't have a king in America. The king is we the people. That's how our system works. But we the people had to essentially give permission now for the hard work of restoring the country, of restoring truth, justice, and the American way. And I don't think the American people had an appetite for that up until now. I mean, we'd win elections, we'd persuade people to elect a particular governor or legislator or president or whatever, but then they would try to get in there and make the changes necessary, and the people were not ready for it. They weren't ready to give up their socialism. They weren't ready to give up the government program that was providing whatever for them. And so the people, the king, they just weren't ready to rebuild the foundations of a free society. They wanted to hold on to their crumbling society. They wanted to hold on to their socialism that was actually producing a broken culture. And now that's changed. And not for everybody. I mean, I don't want to get into too much nuance here. In a republic like this, you never have everybody. In fact, the will of the people is typically a small percentage of the people, not a majority of the people, a small percentage of the people that are actively engaged in pushing a particular direction. And for most of my life, the left has been more engaged and pushing harder, and that's why they've been winning every major institution in America. That's why they've been winning hearts and souls. That's why they've been winning the culture. That's why you have several generations now that have bought into socialism, and that's why we didn't have permission of the king to rebuild the foundations that made America great in the first place, because the left controlled everything and people were voting for that. They were supporting that. They were sympathetic to that. So when you would talk about the kind of things that needed to happen to restore the country, they just didn't have an appetite for it. And that's what has changed. That's why I'm so hopeful, because the appetite is different. Now the appetite is for the big changes. Now you have guys like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy talking about wiping out entire agencies, and instead of all the whining and crying and squealing that would come from that typically being all that you hear, you actually hear people saying, yes, that makes sense. Yes, there's no reason for a Department of Education at the federal level. Now, I've been saying that since Ronald Reagan was saying it. I mean, Jimmy Carter's the one that created the Department of Education. This thing's only been around since the Carter administration, and it's destroyed education. Hasn't made it better. So we've known for a long time this needed to happen, but the appetite of the people wasn't there. They wanted more socialism. They wanted the federal government to solve all their problems. They wanted the federal government to give money to their local school and control what was going on in their school. They wanted to see that's what's changed. Now there's I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a strong enough, loud enough, active enough percentage of the American people saying, get rid of the Department of Education, get rid of the Department of Agriculture, shrink significantly the IRS and these other agencies that are necessary and constitutional, but are bloated. I even saw Rand Paul the other day grilling the post office, I guess the postmaster general, I don't remember who it was, but basically grilling and saying, wait a minute, you guys have you shrunk by 80% in terms of your workload. In other words, 80% fewer people are going to the post office to ship stuff because we all know it's a pain, and they treat you like you're dirt and like you're a problem for them because they have, all these protections. So they have no reason to serve the customer. They have no reason to actually provide for the person that's walking in and going to give them money to ship a package. And so it's been a disaster since the left took over. And so it's 80% less volume. So they got 80% less work, yet they've dramatically increased in budget and staff and everything else. And people are finally saying, that's stupid. There is no reason we should be doing that. Let's reverse these horrible trends. I know I'm rambling today, folks, but I'm just flat out giddy again. I'm just giddy. I mean, not just about the election, again, about the appetite of the American people, about just the narrative. The fact that the narrative right now is in this direction. The fact that Donald Trump's talking about pardoning J6 defendants, the fact that he's talking about all of these other things that we've been hoping would happen, but now it's about to happen. It's just incredible, folks. And so I want to get back to where I was right before the break and talk about what you can do in these last few weeks getting ready for 2025. What are the things that we as citizens who are paying attention, what are things that we as biblical citizens, that's our mantra, be a biblical citizen. Do what the Bible says first and foremost, but then do that. Be a disciple of Christ in the culture where you've been planted. Be a blessing to the nation where you are. And so how do we do that in America? How do we be biblical citizens that as salt and light in our communities, we're a blessing to the world around us? That we actually bring justice and mercy and all the things that it takes to have a good society. Well, you have a role in that, my friend. And it's more than just listening to American Family Radio. It's more than just voting in November. It's being an active biblical citizen right where you are, wherever God's planted you, whatever part of the country you're in, whether you're in blue or red or wherever you are, looking around you and going, what can I do to help make my community better? What can I do to help press the gas to make the most of this moment in time, this inflection point in history where I can help influence what's going on in my neighborhood? And I just want to throw out some things to you that I believe are going to be absolutely critical for making the most of this moment, for actually turning the nation around. Some things that are very doable. And nothing I'm going to share with you today is hard. All of these things are, frankly, really easy. It's just going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take you being willing to invest some of your life, That's your time. Some of your fortune. Yep, a few dollars here and there, nothing big. And your sacred honor, your reputation, being willing to stand up and speak truth no matter what it costs you. Being willing to stand up in your community and make a difference. So there's a couple of general areas that today I'm just going to throw these out to you. And over the next few weeks and months, we're going to be giving you action steps on how to do these things. But you've heard me talk about some of these things in the past. I want to try as we go into this wonderful period of time before our 250th birthday to really make it actionable for you, to have metrics that are measurable, that things that you can do, and then chalk up the victory and literally put that victory on the board. Does that make sense? In other words, not just rally, not just listen, not just share, but actually do some things in your community where when that happens, that's a victory that we want to put on the board. And so we're going to try to, essentially keep up with that throughout these next few months before the 250th birthday. But here's just generally speaking, the types of things we're going to be talking about and doing. And again, this one you've heard me talk about a million times. But it starts at the top. We have to restore biblical citizenship. Like I just said, we have to get the mindset of what it means to be a good citizen and how to do that effectively. Now, we've been doing that a long time, and we've influenced a small percentage of the people. So we've got over 1 million people that have been through our biblical citizenship course. We got a ton of people that have gotten elected as a result of that or gotten engaged, doing things all over the country. That's not a big enough percentage, though. We need 5 million biblical citizens doing the things we're talking about here. That will then cement this restoration of truth, justice, and the American way. So, and I know for those of you that are wondering, okay, why does he keep quoting Superman? All right, it's not Superman. All right, it did come out in the Superman radio program first before the comic book, just so you know. But truth, justice, and the American way was not Superman. It was Thomas Jefferson. It's what the Declaration of Independence actually lays out. Truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, that's truth, justice, and the American way. Now, Jefferson lays out 27 violations of justice by the king, and why we're declaring the causes that impel us to the separation. It's for justice. So he has to lay out truth, what we're building this thing on, but the whole document is about justice and creating the American way. So when I say truth, justice, and the American way, yes, I'm reminding you a little bit of Superman, but at the same time, I want to make sure we understand it goes back to Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence. That's where truth, justice, and the American way began. So anyway, back to how we do this. Number one, we're going to restore biblical citizenship in America. And that means we have to get enough citizens to go through our biblical citizenship course, to study these things, to start actively giving of their lives, fortune, sacred honor, their time, their money, their reputation. And that's how we're going to restore the nation. Now that we're going to measure it. So we're looking for 5 million students to go through biblical citizenship. We're looking for 100,000 Constitution hosts or coaches, folks that will actually host these classes in their homes and their churches and all over the country. And then 10,000 candidates for public office. That's water district, city council, state legislature, school board, Congress, all of it. So 5 million biblical citizens, 100,000 hosts or coaches, and 10,000 candidates. Those metrics, we meet those metrics, you are going to feel the cementing of the restoration of truth, justice, and the American way. So that's one, restore biblical citizenship in America. Number two, we've got to restore a God consciousness in the American culture. Now that is, again, back to Jefferson. He actually talks about this in his inaugural address as president, that we have to acknowledge God, that it's a proper function and a requirement, frankly. If you want the culture to be good, government has to acknowledge God. The public has to acknowledge God. Ronald Reagan talked about we need to restore civic ritual so that we'll remember who we are as a people. Well, the Coach Kennedy case gives us the opportunity to do this, to restore that God consciousness. We've had a horrific loss after loss after loss for 50 years on God consciousness. The secularists, the God-hating, America-hating people won for decades. They got the nativity scenes out of our downtown squares. They got the 10 Commandments taken down. They got In God We Trust taken down. They got, stopped prayers and all these things. They won for 50 years, and it had a horrible effect on our culture. But now we're winning. Now we have, after the Coach Kennedy case, every right, as we always had constitutionally, but you had these lousy Supreme Court decisions overturned now by the Kennedy case. Now we're going to go back and we're going to get the 10 Commandments displays back into our schools, back into our courthouses, back into our public buildings. We're going to get the nativity scenes back into our communities. We're going to get the In God We Trust national motto in classrooms all over this nation. We're going to restore those canceled monuments and so many more things. God consciousness in the culture is critical if the nation is going to last. God consciousness is absolutely essential for a free people to stay free. If you don't have God consciousness, then you forget that our freedom comes from God, not government, and you start living out your freedom as if it comes from government, and you allow government to start taking that freedom away. Or if you believe there is no God and you're pure libertarian and you think freedom it's the freedom to do anything and everything you want, and since there's no God, you have no limitations, then you become so crazy that government has to grow in order to restore order in the community. The government has to start taking away your freedom because your action's so crazy. We have to have more government in order to just stop killing each other and destroying the nation. So either way, whichever way you go with making government your God or making yourself God, if you do either of those things, you'll lose liberty. And so having a God consciousness helps us to remember that our freedom comes from God, not government, and not from each other, and not from ourselves, and therefore must be lived out with a respect for the authority of God. And that produces a free society that people want to live in. So we got to restore biblical citizenship. We got to restore a God consciousness. And then we got to restore the teaching of truth in our schools. So in order for this to last, you have to restore the education system. You have to get back to where you're teaching the next generation these basic truths from the Declaration and the Constitution. And that's going to require passing Celebrate Freedom Week in all 50 states. That's what I passed in Texas 20 years ago, and requires the teaching of the Constitution and the Declaration in every classroom every single year. It's going to require celebrating Constitution Day in these schools across the country. So restoring the teaching of truth in our schools. And then the last thing, the fourth step. So number one, restore our biblical citizenship. Number two, restore a God consciousness. Number three, restore the teaching of truth in schools, in our education system, whether you're homeschool, private school, or public school. And then lastly, number four, restore the republic by restoring federalism and limiting the power of government at all levels. Now, that is a structural change that's going to take time. It's going to require constitutional amendments to put the federal government back into its proper box and get it limited to doing only those things that only the federal government should do. It's going to require working at the local level to restore the property rights and get the government out of the land control business of micromanaging your property. So it's at the local level and all the way up to the federal level, restoring federalism and limiting the power of government. That's how you restore the republic long term. We got to reset the table and restore those basic ideas of liberty that the founding fathers put in place all those years ago. Now, I just laid out very simple things. Other than that last one. That last one's a big one. That is a very big deal to get that done. But it starts with restoring basic biblical citizenship in our own lives and in the people around us. Then restoring that God consciousness, using that biblical citizenship to restore God consciousness in the culture all around us. Restoring the teaching of truth so that we're passing that torch of freedom generation to generation. And then the heavy one is restoring the system itself, resetting the table to restore the republic by restoring federalism and limited government. We can do these things, folks. We can absolutely do these things. The table is ready to be set. I mean, the king is given permission. The king is given the blessing. We the people, of course. And so now let's go rebuild the walls. What I just laid out for you, those are the bricks that we need to lay. And you are the bricklayer. Those are the bricks that will make our nation strong again. Let's rebuild this foundation. We got to take a break, folks. Stay with me. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
Whether it's a story about prayer in public schools or battles for biblical truth within our denominations, the American Family News Network is here to tell you what the newsmakers are saying.
We are starting to see a rebellion against corporate America's endorsement, coddling of the LGBTQ agenda.
The American Family News Network is comprised of news anchors and editors that team up to bring you news from a Christian perspective.
A TRO, for non-legal types out there, is basically just an emergency order that would have allowed Liam to go back to school wearing the t-shirt he wants to wear. And again, that t-shirt says there are two genders.
Not only can you listen to reports on the radio, but you can also visit afn.net for coverage of the latest headlines.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, out on the campaign trail, was ready with an answer on the meaning of the word woke.
American Family News, reporters you can trust.
Some guy who claims to be a girl is not science. I'm sorry.
It's not.
You just can't claim to be something that you're not.
No, we don't allow people to choose their ethnicity.
No.
Or their age.
No, I can't say I'm an Eskimo, so provide me with a free igloo. We don't let people do that.
We don't.
You're a male, and you can't claim to be a female, because you're not.
Today's Issues, weekday mornings at 11 Eastern and 10 Central on American Family Radio.
How do you deal with it when the person that you're caring for doesn't show gratitude? We're not in bondage to other people's gratitude. He came with no thought of our gratitude. He loved us while we were enemies. Who are we to withhold that which was given so lavishly to us?
Join Peter Rosenberger on Hope for the Caregiver, Saturdays at 7 a.m. and Sundays at 10 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back at the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. It's December 10th. Thanks for staying with me on this Tuesday. I know I'm kind of ranting today, but I want to kind of lay out this ground of where we're headed here towards the end of the year in 2024 as we prepare for 2025. Now, what we've been talking about is, number one, the appetite of the country and how it's different from anything I've dealt with in my 30 years of being engaged in this fight. It is a wonderful time to be alive, and the window of opportunity, as I said earlier, is cracked open, and we've got to shove it open, dive through, and restore liberty in this country. So in our last segment, I was laying out the 4 steps that we need to take, the 4 action areas in order to restore truth, justice, and the American way, in order to restore the Declaration. We've got just 570 days or so before the 250th birthday of the country, typically when nations fall apart and crumble, and we're going to do the opposite. We're going to restore the nation. We're going to rebuild liberty in this country. We're going to take that time to do 4 things. Number 1, we're going to restore biblical citizenship. Now, you may have become a biblical citizen. Maybe you took our biblical citizenship in Modern America course. Maybe you've been studying what the Bible says about how to be a good citizen and studying the Constitution on how to do that in this country. And that's what that biblical citizenship class walks you through. But I'm going to challenge you to help other people do the same thing. So as I mentioned in the last segment, we're going to restore biblical citizenship. We're going to restore a God consciousness. We're going to restore the teaching of truth in our education system. And we're going to restore the republic by restoring federalism and limited power. So let's go back to what you're going to do to be a part of those. Last segment, we explained all that. If you're just tuning in, go to our website today and you can listen to the last segment. But let's talk about how you can be a part of that. So number 1, restoring biblical citizenship. I gave you 3 metrics. 1, we need 5 million biblical citizens. 5 million that go through our biblical citizenship in Modern America course. Number 2, we need 100,000 Constitution coaches or hosts to do these classes, to host these things around the country. And number 3, we need 10,000 candidates then to run for public office and go be biblical citizens in public office. Okay, so what can you do on this item, restoring biblical citizenship? Well, obviously, be one. Be a biblical citizen. Go through the course yourself and be a coach. Be a host. Bring 5 people into your living room or 500 people in your church or 20 people in your church, whatever your situation is. All of that can be done for free, okay? You don't need any money to do that. You just need a willingness to give of your time. So sign up today at patriotacademy.com. Go to patriotacademy.com. Click on Constitution Coach and sign up to be a coach so that you can do biblical citizenship classes in your church, your home, whatever it might be. That's an easy one, folks. I'm encouraging you to do that today so that you're ready to host a class right after the first of the year. All right, we're down to a couple of weeks left in the year. Right now's the time to sign up, get your stuff together, you get all your courses online and all that ready to go. You don't have to go through the class before you host it. You can host it while you're going through it with other people. You're just literally saying, I'm a fellow citizen and we're all going to do this together. So anyway, get that done today. That one's so easy. Everybody listening to the sound of my voice right now can do that. We've got 30,000 coaches already. Can you be 30,001? Yes, you can. Absolutely. Get signed up today and then start getting those classes going. You can get signed up and go ahead and set your date in January for starting your class. It's an 8-week class, one night a week. You can do it in the afternoon on Sunday afternoon at church after the services, Sunday evening or weeknight, whatever works for you. Everybody does it different. We got thousands of classes going all over the country. All right, you can do that, absolutely. And I know from experience with over 10,000 classes having taken place, I know what happens when you do that. It will start to build that group of people in your life, in your community, to do the rest of these items that I'm about to mention. So it begins with restoring biblical citizenship personally, signing up to be a coach, and hosting a class. Do that right now so that you're ready to host your class right after the first of the year. So restoring biblical citizenship. The second one is restoring the God consciousness, and here's what you can do to be a part of that. Once you sign up as a coach, then we're going to help you with packets on exactly what to do to get the 10 Commandments back up in your local courthouse. Exactly what to do to get the nativity scene back in your community. Probably too late for this year. I don't know. Maybe you could get it done in these last couple of weeks, but we're really pushing for 2026 on that. Exactly what to do to get the American Family Association has been doing this a long time. Okay, the In God We Trust posters. I put the In God We Trust posters up in schools when I was a state rep 25 years ago. American Family printed them. They had these really cool motto posters, and I sent one to every campus of every school in my district. I think at the time when I was a state rep, I had 10 different school districts. And so you had, 15, 20 campuses in some of those school districts. And some of them only had 1 or 2. But anyway, I sent those posters to every single school district. And they put them up. They put them up all over the schools, except one. Had one school district that didn't do it. And they said, separation of church and state. Had a big school board meeting. School board voted 7-0 to not put In God We Trust, the national motto, up in their schools because they were told by their staff attorney that it was unconstitutional, it was going to violate separation of church and state, blah, blah, blah. So we showed up at the next school board meeting, packed out that room. I think it was probably 200 people there wearing In God We Trust shirts, and the school board got the message, and they switched their vote from 7-0 against to 7-0 for putting up the American Family Association In God We Trust posters. Now, I hope you don't have to go through that, but you might, and we got your back. All right, we First Liberty, and I'm telling you, we're gonna be there with you if that type of thing happens to you. But most likely, they're gonna do it. And so restoring God consciousness. There's a lot of things you can do, from getting the nativity scenes up to In God We Trust national motto, 10 Commandments. We're gonna work on all of that in 2025. But you need to be ready for that, and the only way you're gonna be ready for that is if you go to patriotacademy.com. Sign up to be a Constitution coach, get a class on the calendar for January, and out of that class, you will have the team that you need to go restore a God consciousness in your community. So number 1, restore biblical citizenship. Number 2, restore a God consciousness. And those are some of the things that you can do to help make that happen. Number 3, restoring the teaching of truth in our schools. You can help get Celebrate Freedom Week passed in your state if it hadn't already happened. I think we got 7 states that have done it now. We're going to get all 50 to do that. You can get your local school district, make sure that they are planning a celebration of Constitution Day for next year. So those action items will be in 2025 on our restoring of truth in our education system, or maybe for your homeschool co-op, or even just if you're homeschooling yourself, getting some of our curriculum to be able to teach your children how to be patriots. Okay, so that's number 1, restore biblical citizenship. Sign up as a coach. That's your action item. Number 2, restore God consciousness. By signing up as a coach, you'll be ready to lead the way to get the 10 Commandments displays and all the other things in your community. Number 3, restoring truth in schools. You're going to lead the way on helping to do that by getting Celebrate Freedom Week passed in your state, or by simply making sure the local school district is actually doing those things. And then number 4, restore the republic by restoring federalism and limiting the power of the federal government. How are we going to do that? Well, we have to do a convention of states in order to amend the Constitution to put the feds back in their box. We have to get rid of all of these. Now, here's the thing. If President Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk get rid of the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Education, praise God. That'll be wonderful. But it's going to flip The pendulum's going to swing, all right? And so if you only allow these things to happen through presidential, executive orders, or even through an act of Congress, then you're limited to the next time the left gets control, and they'll turn around and do exactly what they did before. But with a constitutional amendment, you make it very difficult for them to do that. It will take decades and decades, maybe even a century, before they would be able to overrule that constitutional amendment. Name me a constitutional amendment that's been passed in the last 150 years that's not being followed. People say all the time, well, they're not following the Constitution, Rick. Why would a constitutional amendment be followed? Because they do follow amendments. They're ignoring parts of the Constitution that are more than 150 years old because they've been able to manipulate the understanding of that part of the Constitution through bad education, through bad Supreme Court decisions. What we're going to do is reset the table, restore the original intent of the Constitution, and do that through constitutional amendments, and then it'll take them 100 years to mess that up. Okay, that requires some heavy lifting. We're on our way, but a constitutional amendment through the Article 5 constitutional amendment process takes several steps. You have to get 34 states to actually call for a convention where they then propose amendments, and 38 states then have to ratify those amendments. So this is going to take time. This one's going to take a while, but you can be a part of that by signing up at conventionofstates.com. All right, so quick reminder. Here's the 4 things that we're going to work on going into 2025. But now you can't wait until then. You got to take some action steps today to be prepared for 2025. All right, number 1, we're going to restore biblical citizenship. That begins with you. You become a biblical citizen. You take biblical citizenship in modern America. You sign up as a host or coach, and you help other people do the same thing. So number 1, we're going to restore biblical citizenship. Number 2, we're going to restore a God consciousness in the American culture, and you're going to be a part of doing that in your community by getting those displays of the 10 Commandments, the national motto, the nativity scenes, all those things back into the culture. Number 3, we're going to restore teaching of truth in our education system. You're going to help make that happen, either just in your home as you're homeschooling or helping your kids homeschool your grandkids, or maybe it's going to be at a local private school and you bring in a Constitution training or whatever it might be to them, or your local public school. But there's a lot of actions we're going to have for you in 2025 to help make that happen. So number 1, restore biblical citizenship. Number 2, restore God consciousness. Number 3, restore the teaching of truth in our schools. And number 4, restore the republic by restoring federalism and limiting federal power. Now, I know I've been repetitive today, but the goal today for me has been that you get lit on fire for these 4 areas and you start helping us to gain ground. As I mentioned, the appetite is like never before. The American people want this to happen. The American people have given us permission to take our country back. The American people have given us permission to rebuild the walls. Now, in order to rebuild the walls, you got to know how to rebuild. You got to know what bricks to rebuild with. You got to know how to lay those bricks, and that's why you need to be listening to At the Core every day of the week. Now, Mark Walker will be with you Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'll be with you Tuesdays and Thursdays. So make sure you're listening to stay tuned in on what's going on and stay plugged in, and we'll have action items for you once in a while. But if you're really going to get involved, if you're really going to help make a change, you got to sign up today at patriotacademy.com. Become a Constitution coach. Start hosting those classes right there in your home, right there in your church. And then let's start getting that God consciousness into our culture. Start getting more candidates to run. I mean, we need to flood the elections for 2026 with biblical citizens running for every office imaginable, from local dog catcher, water district, city council, school district, superintendents. Well, superintendents aren't elected, but they're appointed by the school board. But if we get enough people elected to the school board, they'll get a good superintendent. You get my point. We literally have to flood the public office arena with biblical citizens, and we will see permanent change in this country, as permanent as we can get, which I'll be happy with a 50 or 100-year dividend to the things that we're doing right now. And you can be a part of that. All right, I know I've thrown a lot at you today. I hopefully have you thinking a lot about what you're going to do in 2025 to help save this country. I hope you're thinking about all of the little things you can do. None of the things that I'm talking about right now are going to require you to spend your life savings or any of those things. I mean, I've been saying for a couple of years that life's fortune, sacred honor, that we're at a inflection point in time where you need to sell the boat or you stop playing golf or whatever and take that money and put it into saving the country. I still think you should do those things, but at this point, you can still make a big difference without having to put a penny in, because we're coming alongside you. We're going to provide you with all these tools for free. Doesn't cost you anything to become a Constitution host or a Constitution coach and start doing these classes. Doesn't cost you anything to go stand before your school board or city council or county commissioner or county commission and get them to put the national motto, "In God We Trust," on the dais there, so that when people come in and testify, they have that God consciousness of who's actually our source and our resource. So all of these things are things that you can do, and we're going to talk a lot more about them throughout the rest of this year and all throughout 2025, and constantly give you action items. But I'm asking you to take action today. Do not wait. It's kind of like a, I don't know. It's like the story in Julius Caesar. There was a great story. I remember Neil Jeffrey telling this story. Pastor Neil Jeffrey came and spoke at a dinner for me several years ago, a couple of decades ago actually, and he told the story of Julius Caesar, and he was talking about you've got to take advantage of opportunity when it hits. You've got to make sure you don't miss the opportunity that God's given you. And so God's given us this amazing opportunity in our country right now. Are we going to take advantage of it? Are we going to seize the day? Remember Dead Poets Society, Carpe Diem. Are we going to seize the day? And this story out of Julius Caesar, I forget which act it is. I think it's Act 4, Scene 3 or something like that. Anyway, it's after they've killed Caesar. Brutus and Cassius are on the run, and Mark Antony's in hot pursuit. And Brutus and Cassius have stopped for the night, and they're trying to figure out what to do. Do we fight? Do we keep running? And I don't remember which one said it, but they said something to this effect. They said, "There's a tide in the affairs of men that, if taken at the swell, leads on to fame and fortune, but if missed, returns life to the shallows." Now, think about what he just said. I never really understood William Shakespeare. In fact, the only reason I know where that is that it's in like page 67 of the Cliff Notes. All right, but seriously, think about what he said. He's saying that if you hit the wave just right, it's kind of like surfing. I mean, if you hit that wave, if you paddle and you identify that wave and you hit that wave just right, you can ride it all the way into the beach. It's powerful. It's a rush. It's exciting. It's amazing. But if you miss the wave, then everything around you just kind of settles down, and there's nothing happening. There's nothing going on. It's like it just returns life to the shallows. But if you do hit the wave just right, it is exciting. And here we are. There's this wave in America for liberty. There's this incredible opportunity to restore truth, justice, and the American way. And you get to play a role in it. You get to paddle as fast as you can and jump up on that board and ride that wave all the way into the beach. Are you going to participate in this restoration of liberty? I challenge you, start thinking now about how you can give of your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor in 2025. That you can do the things over the next few months that we have prior to the 250th birthday of the nation that it's going to take to save the nation. Together we can do it. God bless you for listening today. More for you later this week. You've been listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.